It was a warm Saturday afternoon when I first met Chris. The sun was low in the sky, casting long shadows across the park where we had bumped into each other by chance. I was sitting on a bench, scrolling through my phone, when I felt a tap on my shoulder. I looked up, startled, only to be greeted by the most handsome man I'd ever seen. "Hey, are you okay?" he asked, noticing the look of surprise on my face. I smiled nervously. "Yeah, I was just lost in thought. It's nice to meet you. I'm Emma." "Chris," he said, extending his hand. "Nice to meet you too." Our conversation flowed effortlessly, and before I knew it, we had been talking for hours. He had this charm about him, a way of making me feel special, like I was the only person in the world who mattered. At first, it was thrilling, this feeling of being seen, of being wanted. But as time went on, the charm started to fade. The red flags that I had ignored in the beginning began to appear more frequently. It started small. Chris would make little comments about my appearance, like how I should wear my hair a certain way, or how I needed to dress more professionally for my job. At first, I brushed it off. He was just trying to help, I thought. But soon, those little comments turned into bigger critiques. "Why do you hang out with them?" he asked one evening, referring to my friends. "They're not really your type." I was taken aback. "What do you mean?" "They're my friends. We've known each other for years." "I just think they're a bad influence on you," he said, his tone condescending. "You could do so much better." I felt a knot in my stomach, but I didn't say anything. I just nodded, unsure of how to respond. Over time, Chris became more critical, questioning my choices, undermining my confidence. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, just a phase. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. By the time we hit our second year together, Chris's controlling nature had fully emerged. He would check my phone when I wasn't looking, ask who I was texting, and make sure I wasn't spending time with my friends without him. He even made me feel guilty for wanting to go out with them, often calling me selfish or accusing me of not caring about him. "Why do you need to go out with them again?" he would ask, his voice tinged with irritation. "It's just a dinner," I would reply. "I haven't seen them in weeks." "I don't know, Emma. It just seems like you care more about them than me," he would say, his words making me feel like I was doing something wrong. It wasn't long before I started to lose touch with the friends who had always been there for me. I spent more and more time with Chris, and the longer I stayed in the relationship, the more isolated I became. One night, things finally hit rock bottom. I had spent all day preparing a special dinner for Chris, hoping to make up for an argument we'd had earlier in the week. But as I was cooking, I accidentally burned the food. "Are you serious?" Chris shouted, slamming his fist on the counter. "You couldn't even get this right?" I stood there, frozen, tears welling up in my eyes. This wasn't the first time he had yelled at me over something small, but something inside me snapped. "Chris, it was just an accident," I said softly, trying to keep my composure. "It's not a big deal." "It is to me," he spat, his face turning red with anger. "I can't believe you're this careless." I was crushed. I tried to apologize, but it didn't matter. Nothing I did ever seemed good enough for him anymore. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the weight of everything pressing down on me. I knew I couldn't keep living like this, but the thought of leaving felt unbearable. It took a few more months, but I finally found the courage to leave. The manipulation, the emotional abuse, the constant feeling of never being enough, it had all taken its toll. One day, I sat him down and told him I was done. "I can't do this anymore, Chris," I said, my voice trembling. "I deserve better than this." He looked at me, his face a mixture of shock and anger. "You're just going to leave? After everything I've done for you?" "I can't keep living like this," I whispered. "I need to find myself again. I'm sorry." Chris didn't take it well. He begged, pleaded, and even promised to change, but I had heard it all before. I was done. Chapter 6. Healing and Moving Forward. The first few weeks after leaving were the hardest. I missed the good parts of the relationship, the times when Chris was kind, when things felt right. But every time I thought about going back, I reminded myself of the pain he had caused me. I leaned on my friends for support. They were there for me when I needed them most, reminding me of my worth and encouraging me to move forward. Slowly, I began to rebuild my life. I found strength in myself, something I hadn't realized I had before. It wasn't easy, but I learned to love myself again. I knew now that love should never hurt, and I promised myself that I would never settle for anything less than respect and kindness. After leaving Chris, Emma felt a mixture of relief and confusion. There was a sense of freedom, but it came with a heavy burden of self-doubt. For so long, she had been told what to do, how to act, and who she should be. Now, with no one controlling her every move, she had to rediscover herself. The first few days were the hardest. She sat in her apartment, staring at the blank walls, her thoughts racing. What now? Who was she outside of the relationship? Who was she, without the constant barrage of criticism and manipulation? At night, she would lie awake, feeling an ache in her chest. She missed the good moments, the times when Chris had made her laugh, when she felt like they were a team. But those moments were few and far between, and the emotional scars from the bad moments were much more vivid. Slowly, Emma began to realize that the love she thought she had with Chris was only an illusion. She spent time reflecting on the red flags she had ignored, how Chris had made her feel like she wasn't good enough, how he had isolated her from her friends, how he had chipped away at her confidence bit by bit. She had allowed him to convince her that she needed him, that without him, she was nothing. But that was a lie. She was enough. She had always been enough. It didn't take long for Emma to realize that she had been neglecting her own needs for far too long. The vibrant, adventurous person she had been before Chris had been buried under layers of doubt and insecurity. But now, with the weight of the relationship lifted, she began to rediscover the things she once loved. She picked up her old sketchbook and started drawing again, something she hadn't done in years. The lines and colors were her way of reconnecting with herself, of expressing the emotions she had been unable to voice during her time with Chris. Emma also took up yoga and meditation, seeking peace and stillness within herself. It wasn't an easy process. She found herself battling negative thoughts and old patterns of self-criticism. But each day, she grew stronger, learning to silence the voice that told her she wasn't worthy. As Emma began to rebuild, she leaned heavily on her friends. They were her lifeline, reminding her of her worth and providing the emotional support she needed to heal. They had been there when she needed them most, even when she had pulled away from them during her time with Chris. One evening, Emma met up with her best friend, Rachel, at a cozy cafe. It had been a while since they had spent quality time together, and Emma felt a sense of warmth as they sat across from each other. "I'm so proud of you, Em," Rachel said, smiling gently. "I know it's been tough, but you're so much stronger than you realize." Emma felt a lump form in her throat. "I don't feel strong," she admitted. "I feel like I've lost so much time. I let him control me for so long. I don't even know who I am anymore." Rachel reached across the table, taking Emma's hand in hers. "You're still you," she said firmly. "You're just learning how to be the real you again. And you've got me, okay? We're going to figure this out together." Months passed, and Emma found herself growing more comfortable in her own skin. She started doing things she had always wanted to do, taking weekend trips, trying new hobbies, and diving deeper into her career. She began to understand that she didn't need someone else to validate her worth. She was complete on her own. One evening, while sitting on her balcony watching the sunset, Emma received a text from Chris. It had been weeks since they last spoke, and although part of her wanted to ignore it, she felt a strange urge to read his message. "Chris, I've been thinking a lot about us. I realize now that I wasn't perfect, but I want to make things right. I miss you." Emma's heart fluttered for a moment, but she quickly reminded herself why she had left in the first place. She had spent too long being made to feel small and unimportant. Her happiness was no longer tied to him. She took a deep breath and typed out her response. Emma, I'm glad you're reflecting on things, but I've moved on. I found peace in myself, and I don't need anyone to complete me. I hope you can find your own path too. It felt freeing to send that message. For the first time in a long time, Emma felt empowered. She had made the right choice, and she didn't need to look back. As Emma continued her journey of healing, she realized that she had been given a second chance. Not just to find love, but to love herself first. She no longer needed someone to tell her who she should be or how she should act. She was her own person, and she was enough just as she was. One evening, after a long day at work, Emma found herself walking through the park where she had met Chris. It felt strange, but there was no longer any pain tied to the place. Instead, she felt gratitude for the lessons she had learned. She sat on the same bench where they had first spoken, closing her eyes as a gentle breeze blew through the trees. Emma smiled softly to herself, knowing that she was finally free. The past was behind her, and the future was full of endless possibilities. She stood up, her heart light, and walked away, knowing that the best was yet to come. It wasn't long before Emma met someone new, but this time it was different. She was no longer searching for validation or approval. She was whole, and anyone who came into her life would need to love her for who she truly was, not someone she pretended to be. She met James at a book club one evening. He was kind, funny, and most importantly, respectful. He never tried to change her, never made her feel less than. Their connection was easy and natural, built on mutual respect and understanding. Emma realized that true love wasn't about control. It was about companionship, trust, and kindness. For the first time, she truly understood the difference between love that builds you up and love that tears you down. And this new love, this healthy, nurturing love, was exactly what she had been waiting for.